We begin in Ukraine, which is marking its Independence Day exactly 3.5 years since Russia began its full-scale invasion. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy led a ceremony in the capital marking the anniversary and said that the war has brought the Ukrainian people a new sense of self-worth.
A minute's silence held in Kyiv's Independence Square to remember those who have died fighting for Ukraine's freedom. This is the fourth time the country has marked its Independence Day since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. Despite what appears to be a diplomatic stall after a flurry of recent meetings facilitated by Donald Trump, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said his country will never surrender its freedom.
Today, Ukraine celebrates Independence Day, fighting, defending itself against attacks and air raid alarms. And very importantly, we are strong and not alone. Every day we are pushing this war back to where it came from, to the Russian sky and Russian soil.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is also visiting Ukraine in a show of support.
Canada understands the lessons of history. We know that Putin can never be trusted. We know that true peace and security requires security guarantees for Ukraine.
For those preparing to head to the war's front line, Independence Day brings into sharp focus what their efforts mean for the future of their nation.
At the moment, Independence Day is a day of fighting for me. Independence is our fight. I'm very grateful to all the guys we are here with.
There is a feeling of pride for our country and a willingness to give my life or live as long as possible to defend our borders and our land.
Posting on social media on Sunday morning, Zelenskyy thanked Trump for a letter in which the US president said he believes in Ukraine's future as an independent nation. But for now, celebrations like this represent a hope rather than reality.
Let's bring in Stephen Blank now. He's a senior fellow in the Foreign Policy Research Institute's Eurasia program in Washington, D.C. Welcome to DW. So we just saw in our report that Canada's Prime Minister visited Kyiv today, and he did not rule out sending Canadian troops to the country. What would be the impact if Western allies deployed their forces to Ukraine?
Well, if Western allies deployed their forces to Ukraine, they have stated that they will only do so as part of a peace agreement. They will not do so if they have to assume a combat role. So any idea that dispatching Canadian, U.S., or anybody else's troops there to fight the Russians is not on the agenda. What is on the agenda is security guarantees. But there is really only one guarantee that will make any sense to Ukraine, and that is credible to Vladimir Putin, and that is membership in NATO. We've been talking for 10 days now about security guarantees, and we haven't gotten past square one. And the Russians insist that any security guarantee has to include it, which is ridiculous because Russia is the aggressor in this case and will not tolerate any security guarantees for Ukraine whatsoever. So at the end of the day, with all this talk, and though the Canadian and the French and British and other governments say they will send troops to Ukraine, the only troops that matter are NATO troops as part of an Article 5 membership of Ukraine. And that is the only thing that will make Putin realize that the war is lost for Russia.
Well, we have heard from the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, and he said that Ukraine's security should be guaranteed by the United Nations, not NATO, as you've said. So what exactly do you believe Russia's vision for Ukraine's security actually looks like?
Well, let's get something straight. The guarantees by the United Nations are not worth anything. We've had years of UN guarantees of security going back to the 1960s in the Middle East, which were worthless and which Russia can obstruct anytime it feels like it. So the only guarantee that makes any sense is and that is effective and credible in the eyes of the Russians is membership in NATO. And there's no exception to this, because even with the allies talking about sending troops to Ukraine, they are not intended to be there as a combat force, but rather as a peace enforcement or peacekeeping force, and that you'd have to send 100,000 troops over there for that to happen. This is not a realistic alternative. Therefore, if the allies want to give Ukraine security guarantees, the only way to do so is NATO. And any talk of including Russia one way or another in Ukrainian guarantees is ridiculous, because Russia is the aggressor here and doesn't really want any guarantees for Ukraine, so in order to have a free hand to destroy it.
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump has ruled out Ukraine joining NATO. So should there be some sort of peace agreement? And if indeed European troops are stationed in Ukraine, could they have any deterrent effect towards Russia at all?
Well, the purpose of European troops in Ukraine would be to deter a second attack by Russia. But the only way that you get that is by sending 100,000 troops or so, at least, in order to deter Russia. And that's not going to happen. And although Donald Trump has ruled out membership in Ukraine for now, we have no choice but to push against that, because that is the only credible guarantee in the eyes of Vladimir Putin. And that is the only audience that counts.
In your assessment, then, are we currently any closer to a peace deal or truce, or have we been seeing nothing more than just talk?
All we have seen from the summit was talk. It was a charade, ultimately, tragically, because the war has gone on. Now Trump is even saying he wants to step away or wash his hands of the whole affair, which indicates that he still doesn't understand anything about this war or why it's going on or what U.S. interests truly are. Nevertheless, those of us who understand Russia and Ukraine and European governments have to keep pushing to get Ukraine the guarantees it needs in wartime, because the Russians are not interested in peace. They are interested in victory. And for them, victory means destroying the state of Ukraine. And it's that simple.
That was international security expert Stephen Blank. Many thanks indeed for all of your insights. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Well, for more, let's bring in Mariana Bujerin, a research associate at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard Kennedy School. Mariana is joining us from Lviv in Western Ukraine. Great to have you on the show today. So, what does Independence Day mean for Ukrainians today as the war rages on there in Ukraine?
In some real sense, this Independence Day, there's a sense of victory. There's the sense that Ukraine survived these 3.5 years against all odds, against the expectations of many international leaders, foreign leaders, but also against the expectations of Ukrainians 3.5 years ago. So as we talk about, peace talks, we talk about the settlement and bringing an end to this war, the terms of which might be disadvantageous to Ukraine. I think today there's a real sense that despite all of that, all of these unfortunate prospects that might be awaiting Ukraine in the future, Ukraine still won. Ukraine survived the onslaught of a much bigger, much mightier adversary.
Now, you mentioned their peace talks because the voices calling for a meeting between President Zelensky and Putin are growing louder and louder. What are your thoughts on a meeting taking place at the stage we're at now?
So, the prospects are uncertain. We've seen many efforts to bring this war to an end. We've seen efforts by President Trump that have been rather unexpected. There have been quite a few U-turns. We'll have to wait and see until this meeting takes place And we'll see frankly, what the United States will do, what the United States leadership will do, and which side, as it were, it will take. Because Ukraine does need assistance in building up its leverage in these peace talks.
Now, one big issue that's been coming up time and time again has been the issue of territory and territorial losses. Would Ukrainians be ready to accept territorial losses in exchange for peace?
That depends, right? I think de facto acceptance that part of Ukraine's sovereign territory will remain for some time, perhaps even long time, under Russian control, is something Ukrainians might be able to accept and live with. In a similar way that East and West Germany remained divided, and there wasn't an official settlement to this division for many decades. I think it would be a much harder sell to grant any kind of diplomatic recognition to the territories that are occupied, including Crimea, not to mention the claim or the ask from Russia, or the demand that the entire Donetsk Oblast, Donetsk region, of which only 60% is currently occupied by Russia, would be somehow incorporated into this Russian territory.
Mariana, we're going to have to leave it there, but great to have you on the show. Mariana Bujerin, Research Associate at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs at Harvard Kennedy School. Thank you.